In this video, we'll walk through adding the ability to show detailed information of a clicked node in a skill tree. We'll do this by creating a visually appealing details widget. So back in our content browser, you can open up the Skill Tree Pro folder, go down to the widgets folder. You're going to right click and go down to user interface widget blueprint, user widget, and you're going to create a WBP skill tree details widget. You can see I've already done that here, so I'm not going to. And then you're going to open it up. And this is where we'll display all the information for a skill when it's clicked on. So we'll have an icon for the skill, a title for it, a research cost, a training button, a flavor text, and a technical text. So we'll start by adding a canvas panel. And then we'll add a border to that panel. And then we'll add a vertical box to the border, adding another border to the vertical box, add a size box to the border, and add an image to the size box. And we'll click on the border. We'll change the anchors to be along the right side of the screen, so this one here. And we're going to set some specific numbers, -50, 50, and that'll give an offset between the top and bottom, and 9, 10, and 50. And we're going to change the alignment to 1 and 0.5. And you can see this is the result we have here. And basically the reason we're setting it this way is so the left side of the detail widget that pops up on screen takes up exactly half the screen. And we're going to change the padding to 50 all around. Go down to brush, change the tint to a nice 0.99, opacity, and make it all the way black. And we're going to draw it as a rounded box and change the outlines to 20 and the width to 10, and change this to fixed radius so we see these rounded corners up here. And we'll change the outline to white, and so we can see it, to raise the alpha. And you can see we have this nice, if we turn off the lines, we have this nice clean rounded white border going around. And we'll go down here to brush color, change it to black, alpha 0.9. And now we see this, we can see a little bit of the background through it. So we'll click on the border and we'll change the horizontal alignment to centered, and the horizontal and vertical alignment of content to centered. Change the padding to an even 20 throughout. Lower the tint opacity to 0. Draw as rounded box again. Have the same settings for the corner radii, 20. Make the outline white and opaque again. Switch it again to fixed radius so we can see it, and make the width 5. And now we see this outline here, and we want to scroll down and make this not hit testable. And now we'll click on the size box here, and the purpose of this is to force our image to be exactly the size we want. We'll give it a padding of 20, and we'll override the width and height to 512. A nice power of 2, so our detail image of that skill will be here. Now we'll also click on image, change the size to 512 by 512, and draw as rounded box. Same settings as before, fixed radius. And now the image will have nice rounded corners here. We'll also make this not hit testable, self only, and we'll also make the image a variable because we're going to want to access it to insert whatever skill image we want. So now we'll collapse the border. So far our vertical box has this image that's surrounded by a border. And we're going to add a few more things to the vertical box. We're going to add 3 texts. Oops. Drag it on the vertical box. We can just duplicate that twice. And we're also going to add a horizontal box to the vertical box and a size box. And we're going to reorder these. We're going to put the horizontal box and the size box under the first text. So text, horizontal size, text, text after the border. And we can rename these. This first one is going to be, and I'm just pressing F2, the first one's going to be title text. And this horizontal box is going to be a research cost holder. So it's going to be a holder that shows the cost to research this skill. And we can rename this text. It'll be the flavor text. And this one will be the technical text. And this will give us the option to have two different kinds of texts with each skill. And we'll click on the first text up here. And we'll change the padding to 0, 10. And this just gives a padding of 10 on the top and bottom. Change it to fill, center, center. Now it's looking a little bit better. And we'll change the text to something sensible, like a sensible placeholder, basic fire magic. And we'll scroll down and make this not hit testable. And we'll skip down here to the flavor text. And we'll do some similar things to that. 0, 10, vertical alignment, fill, and centered, and also not hit testable. Do the same thing to the technical not hit testable, centered text, fill, vertical alignment, and 0, 10. And in this research cost holder, it's just a holding horizontal box that displays the cost to research. So we're going to have two texts. You can drag them in here. And we'll click on the first text, make it fill, right justify, and in the text we'll say research cost, colon, space, space. This will never change. And we can change the color to maybe something like an off orange, maybe something like this, something a little darker perhaps. And the justification to center, and we'll click on the next text and F2. We're going to call this research cost because this is the actual research cost. Let's change the text off the bat to something like 1, which is probably what it'll be. We'll change it to fill, and this to something like 0.63, so it doesn't fill as much, so it's overall this whole thing will be centered in the screen this way. Horizontal alignment left, and justification centered. And since this is the cost it takes to research, it is a variable, so let's make it a variable. And before we forget, let's also make the research cost holder a variable, and all three texts that we added variables, the three texts that we added to the vertical box, because those will all change. And this size box is going to represent the button to train the skill, or once we've clicked the button, just the text that says that it's trained, or just the text that it says it's untrainable currently. So the way we're going to design this, we'll begin by adding an overlay. And to the overlay we'll add a button. And to that button we'll add a text. And then we'll add two more texts to the overlay. And we'll start getting it looking the way we want it to. So in the size box, we'll set its padding to 10 and center its horizontal and vertical alignments. And do a width and height override of 200, 100. And also come down here and change its transform Y translation to something like -10. We don't need to do anything in the overlay, so in the button, let's change its name to train button. This is the training button. We'll make it a variable, and we'll set its horizontal and vertical to fill, and we'll change the look of it a bit. We'll open up the style, open up normal, open up the outline settings, and we'll change this to something like 25 across, and we'll change the width to 3. And for now, we'll come up here, collapse the normal, right click, copy, and we'll paste these settings on hovered, pressed, and disabled so that it maintains its shape regardless of what we're doing. And we'll open normal back up again and maybe change the tint of the normal to something like dark brown. And we'll come up here to size box and change it to fill to make this a more sensible size. We'll come down to the first text, the one that's actually inside the training button, F2, and we'll call it something like train text. And this will always say research, and we'll center it. And we'll come down to the next text, and we'll call it something like untrainable. And this will say not currently trainable, and we'll center that as well. And then the last text down here, we'll call this something like trained. And it'll say trained, and we'll center that. And then maybe we can play with the colors. We'll come up here to the train text and make this like an orange color. And we'll come down to the untrainable and make it like a red color, maybe like a darker red like that. And we'll come to the trained and make it like a green color. And things still look a bit off. We forgot to center all of the texts. Center this one, and this one's already centered. And now just to show a little bit more what it'll look like in game, but basically we're going to be switching between these, the visibility of these in game code. That's how we're setting up this system. So one will only be showing at a time, either the research button with the text or this text or this text. So for example, we can turn the research button off, turn this text on, not currently trainable. Is what it might show when it's not. And we'll come down here for flavor text and justify it to center. And we'll just enter, this is going to change because it's a variable. We're going to set this according to what the flavor text of the skill is, but just as a test, we'll add something long in here. I have something pre-typed out: embarks on the path of mastering fire magic, learning the fundamentals of harnessing flame. And you can see it goes way out of bounds because we need to come down here to auto wrap text. And now it fits in there nicely, but it's a little bit too big. So we'll come back up here and expand the font category and try something like a size of maybe 22. Looks pretty good. We'll do the same thing for the technical text here. We'll make sure that it's set up the same way, size maybe 22. Come down here, auto wrap text. And just so we can see it in action, we'll add something long. I have something pre-typed out, all of this. And you can kind of see now visually how the overall widget will appear. So this is going to show when you click on a skill, it'll show you all the details of that skill. And there are still a few visual changes we could do to make it look better. One thing we can do is we can click on the technical text and we can make it just a slightly less white, maybe a little bit more of a yellowish, maybe something like this. Okay, and the final appearance tweak we're going to do is change some of these fonts. So we'll come back into our content browser and we'll add another folder to Skilltree Pro and we'll call it fonts. And in case you guys don't know, you can just go to fonts.google.com and you have, every kind of font you could ever want, which are CCO. You can use them in commercial products freely. So you can basically find every font you want here. Once you get the fonts you like imported into your project, you can come back over to the details widget and you can set your fonts the way you like. And the last thing we can do to kind of finish off the appearance of this detail widget is have some kind of a placeholder image. I've already imported an image and there we have it. Our detail widget is finished and it's looking pretty good. In case you guys are wondering where I got this image, you can just generate them with DALL-E. Just enter a prompt of what you want and it will generate them for you. Word of advice, if you use AI generated art like this, the different game marketplaces have different stances currently on if they will allow games or to what extent they will allow games with this. The Epic Games Store is currently very pro AI art and Steam is currently very, very vague, and they've changed their stance over the past year. And I believe they're waiting for the litigation in the courts around the world to be decided about whether, this is copyright infringement or not. So word of caution if you guys decide to do something like this in a shipped product. But at the very least, it's nice to have this just as placeholder concept art so you can kind of plug things away and get an idea for how it might look. So now that we have our details widget looking the way we want it to, we need to find a way to open it whenever we click a node and import the information from that node's entry in the data table into the widget. So we can close it. So when we click a node, we're going to update the details widget and we're going to have it do several things. So over here in the graph of the details widget, we're going to create some functions that we'll call when we click the node. We'll create one called update widget, one called update text and image, another one called update research cost, and another one called update button. And we can put all of them in a category called update. So we'll just drag them all up there. And the update widget is the one that we're going to call, and that one's going to call all the others. We're going to click on it, go down here and add an input, and we're going to call it selected node. And that's going to be a WBP skill tree node object reference because we need to know which node that we've selected. And we can promote that to variable, and we can call all three of these other functions that we've created: update text and image, update research cost, and update button. So we'll do the update text and image first. So the first thing we're going to do in here is create a variable. We're going to call it skill tree UI, and that's going to be a WBP skill tree object reference, and we're going to make that instance editable, expose on spawn. We're going to set this as soon as we create the details widget. So we're going to drag that in, and we're going to get the skill tree component and get the data table. Get data table row. From the selected node, we're going to get the node DT name, and we're going to break it into that skill tree node struct. So now we have all of that node's information from its data table entry. We're going to input that into the same function that we're going to create here. So create a new function, call it set text and widget visibility. And we can put that in a helper functions category. We'll give it two input variables, text and text widget. The text will be a text type, and the text widget will be, if you scroll all the way down, this text object reference here. And we'll say if the text is equal exactly, and we'll right click here, promote to local variable, and we'll call this empty text. And you can see it defaults to nothing. So if the text is nothing, on this widget we'll set the visibility to collapsed. And we can duplicate that, copy paste down here. And if it's equal to something, if it's not equal to nothing, we'll set the visibility to not hit testable self only. Drag that connected into here. And then we will set the text to what was input. So this helper function just sets the text of a text widget and collapses it if it's nothing. So now back in the update text and image, we're going to call that function a bunch of times to update the detail widget's text field according to these data table entries. So we'll do a sequence here, add two more pins, and we'll duplicate this a couple times, have three. We're going to set three text fields. First one's going to be the display name, then the flavor description, and then the technical description. And we'll drag in our variables here: title text, flavor text, and technical text. And the last thing we want to do down here is load the picture. And in order to do that, we're going to create an event to asynchronously load it. So in the event graph, we'll make a custom event, just call it load picture. We'll create an input, call it picture, make it a texture 2D soft object reference. And we're going to async load that, and we're going to say if it is valid, and remember to drag this pin off completed. Don't do anything until it's completed. So once completed is valid, we're going to cast that object to a texture 2D. So be sure that this pin only connects to here. We're going to drag in the image, and yours might have a different number, and we're going to set brush from texture. Inputting the texture here, and we can comment this. And now we're going to go back to our update text and image function, and we're going to call that load picture, and we're going to input this picture soft object reference from the data table to load it. So now we're done here with the update text and image function. So now the next one in the update widget is the update research cost. And for that, we're going to drag in this research cost and do a set text. And go back to the update text and image function and copy this functionality here. Come back here and paste it. And now here from the cost, we can say to text integer, and we'll pass that into the text. So now we're done with the updating the research cost. And the last one in the update widget function is update button. So now before updating the button, we're going to check to make sure there are enough points to train it. So we'll get the skill tree UI, get skill tree component, and now we'll go back to our content browser, go up to components folder, open up the BPC skill tree PC. Under skill tree start, we're going to add a new variable, and this is going to turn out to be a very important variable that we'll use a lot. We're going to call it research points and make it an integer, and we'll drag it up to the start category. Let's compile and we'll give it a default value of 10, compile one more time. And now we can close our component, compile in the details widget here, and now we can get that variable that we just created, get research points. So we want to make sure that our available research points is greater than or equal to the cost to train. And if you'll remember, we calculated the cost to train here under the update research cost function. But rather than copy and pasting all this functionality, we can select all of this, right click, go to collapse to function, and we can just call it get research cost. We can drag it into the helper functions category. We can change its output to something more sensible like cost, and we can make it a pure function because we're not setting anything. And now back here in the update button function, we can just drag that function. And one more thing we want to do is open up the get research cost function and disconnect this row not found wire. So now back here in the update button function, if we have enough points to train it, we'll drag in the train button, set visibility to visible, and we'll come back over here to the designer tab and make the untrainable a variable and the trained a variable as well. Come back to the graph, and now that untrainable and trained, we can set the visibility of those to hidden. And if we don't have enough points to train it, we can just copy and paste these down here. This untrainable is going to be what's visible. Compile. Now if we go back in our update widget, we'll see that we're finished here. We're doing all of these things. So now all we need to do is call this function when we click on a node. Open up our WBP skill tree node, and we're going to make it so that when we click on the icon, that drives this event to happen. We currently have it set up so the icon is reduced to 0.8, so the texture will fit inside of it. We're going to put the scale back to 1:1, and we're going to visually reduce the size of the icons later from a system in the component. The reason we're going to use this as sort of a hit test is to simplify this blueprint, because remember, there could be hundreds or thousands of them open at the same time, so we want to double up on functionality as much as possible. So we're going to use the icon, which, if you'll remember, is set to visible. So we'll go over here in the graph, and we're going to create a function. We're going to call it mouse clicked, and we're going to override on mouse button down and also on mouse button double click. We can drag mouse clicked up into the mouse category here, and we're going to call this function when either of these two happen. And the reason we're doing it this way is for the contingency for if we happen to click on a node on the second click of a double click, if we're moving our mouse over and that it happens to click on the node. Basically, whenever we click on a node, it's going to call this functionality. We're going to open up the mouse clicked function, click on it, scroll all the way down. Under inputs, we're going to add a pointer event, and we'll call it mouse button. And under outputs, we'll have an event reply structure. Just call it return value. Now compile, and back here we can plug them in. And also in the on mouse button down. So now that it's all connected with the two override functions, we can close those. So what we need to do here is when a node is selected, we need to notify both itself and the skill tree. So we're going to create node selected functions in both here in the skill tree. Create one here, call it node selected. Go back to the content browser, open up the WBP skill tree, the graph, and create a node selected function in here. We're going to add some inputs. We'll add the node position, the node widget, and the node name. Node position is a vector 2D. The widget can be WBP skill tree node widget, and the name can be a name variable. Compile, go back to the node, and we're going to drag in the skill tree UI variable, call that function node selected. And for the node position, we'll get a reference to self, slot as canvas slot, and just use the get position function, which outputs its position. The node widget will just get a reference to self, and the node name will just drag in this node DT name that we created and input it here. And we're also going to call the node selected function in this blueprint. And then here we can connect the return, and we want to make it handled. We're not going to do anything with the node selected function in this video, but in the next video we'll use it to set the node state. But in this video we'll work in the node selected function for the skill tree UI, so go into that. And we're going to add a sequence, add 2 more pins. We're going to create a new variable, call it details widget, and we'll make it that new WBP skill tree details class that we just created. Drag it up into references. We'll drag it into the graph, and we'll do an isValid check, and we'll drag it off the 2 pin, and you'll see why later. We're going to do some stuff up here, some checks. Drag in the details widget, and we can call that function update widget. So if it's valid, if it's already been created, we'll call that function, and for the selected node we'll pass in this input variable node widget. I'm just going to get it here to keep it nice and organized, get node widget. And if it hasn't yet been created, we're going to create widget, WBP skill tree details, and we need to go back into the details widget and make selected node also instance editable expose on spawn, compile, and over here right click, refresh, because we need to input it here. So we'll input what we need to, and then we'll set it to this details widget variable, and then add to viewport. And also here we want to insert an update widget. And now if we fire up the game, we see our skill tree. We can click on a node, and it shows that details widget. We click on a different node, and it updates. So now there are still a couple things that we want to do. Number one, we notice that if we drag the cursor over, it disappears when we go over this new details widget. That's pretty easy to fix. You can close the game, go into the skill tree details widget, into class defaults, and down here, search for cursor. Click on the cursor as default, and then compile it. Now when we fire up the game, we drag our cursor over and we can still see it, so that's fixed. And we can even take it a step further if we want. In our Details Widget Designer tab, we can click on the train button, not the middle part here, but the whole button itself, and we can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we can add an onHovered and an unhovered event. So we'll add onHovered, go back to Designer, scroll down again, add on unhovered. So now when the training button is hovered over, we can call the function setCursor, and we can set it to something like a hand. Copy and paste that down here, and when it's unhovered, we can set it back to its default. Compile, and now if we fire up the game, click on a node, drag it over, it's a regular cursor, drag it over the research button, now it's a hand. Back to regular cursor. And now another issue we'll notice is if we go to close the skill tree while the details widget is open, the details widget stays on the screen. So we can't have that. So what we can do to fix that is go over to the WBP skill tree blueprint, to the event graph, and we can override this fade out then destroy from our base widget functionality. Right click, add call to parent, because we still want all the functionality that the parent's doing. But in addition to that, we want to get this details widget, and we want to say if it's valid, then we can also fade out and destroy it. And we can comment that. And the other thing we need to do is in the WBP skill tree node selected function, for that details widget, we want to call that fade in function that we created in the base widget. And we need to remember to, over in our skill tree details widget, go to class settings and change the parent class to widget base. Compile. Now when we fire up the game, select a node, it fades in nicely. If we want to close the skill tree while it's open, the whole thing fades out. We'll notice that the details widget fades out a little bit faster than the skill tree, and that's because if you'll remember over here in the class defaults, we made it so we could adjust the fade in time, fade out time, and things like that. Going to the class defaults here, we made the fade out time longer over here. It's like 1.4, and in the details it's 0.3. So we could change those to match or change those to whatever we want. For now, maybe I'll just do something like 0.5 across the board. And if we open it back up, they fade out together. And now the last thing we'll notice is the details widgets are looking rather simplistic, and that's because we haven't input any of this information yet in the data table. So if we want to make it look a little bit more fleshed out, we can close the game, go back into the content browser, into the MISC data folder, open up the data table, and we can add flavor descriptions and technical descriptions to all of the different nodes here. And now when we click on our nodes, we see the updated pictures, texts, and descriptions, and everything is looking really good. And now one last issue we'll see is if we drag the skill tree over while the details widget is open, it stops when it hits the details widget. And the way we can fix that is in our WBP skill tree blueprint in the on mouse move function, we can copy all of it. And in the WBP skill tree details, we can override on mouse move, and we can paste it and delete this cursor position here, and drag in the skill tree UI, set cursor, go back to the skill tree blueprint, make sure that it's not private. So then compile both, and then in here we can set cursor position. And once everything's connected, compile, you can fire it up. And now we can seamlessly drag everything around underneath the details widget. So now that we've got the skill tree looking the way we want, in the upcoming videos we'll add the ability to learn a skill and then update its appearance and its connector's appearance once it's been learned, so that we can visually see which skills have been learned and which haven't.